This is Karen White of Divine Time Astrology, and I have with me Channing Ayers, a friend and a colleague who is also an astrologer. And at the end of this, we'll give you the information. Do you have a website, Channing?
No, not right now. I work with Ryan through Asheville Vedic Astrology.
You're on his website.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay. Her information is on Ryan Kurzak's Asheville Vedic Astrology website. So you can find her that way, but we'll also give you her other, your email address, other contact information. So she's catching up to the online world. She'll get there.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. I'm staying away.
So you're not planning to have a website?
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see
Okay.
I mean, people can get in touch with me really easily, and then we can just talk one-on-one, and we'll see.
Okay.
We'll start doing videos together, and we'll see how.
Yeah. So people can get to know you. She's a great astrologer, everybody, and she has a very interesting background. Okay, I don't remember exactly what it's called, but it has to do with Jungian psychology.
Yeah. Back in the day, I was very interested in Jungian psychology and expressive arts therapies and all sorts of transpersonal psychology. So this kind of opened up the doorway into the deeper understanding of astrology and how we can use it to understand ourselves, our nature, our relationships, those kinds of things as well. So
Exactly.
hand in hand. Mm-hmm.
And you're a healer as well. You have that in your chart, I remember. You're a healer. So, of course, being an astrologer is a healer. And the other thing I found fascinating is that you had a restaurant at one time, a vegetarian restaurant.
I did. I had a vegetarian restaurant for about 5 years.
Yeah.
when I got out of school and just, I love to cook. I've always been a good cook, and I love vegetarian food and bringing alternatives to people. So I did that for a while.
It's now one of my missions to somehow have a meal cooked by you.
We'll make that happen.
It will be fun. And in fact, what Channing was going to do with me is we were going to do monthly forecasts. But honestly, that doesn't light us up, because there's so many other people doing it and they're doing it so well. So she started talking to me about attachment theory. A couple of books, and I'm like, oh my God, these have seriously changed my life. They're that profound and explain so much for me, and I think would be so helpful to my YouTube audience, people on my list, clients, your clients, anybody who finds this information as it relates to astrology. It's another body of knowledge that can be integrated, I think. So that's what we're doing today. We are figuring it out. So we don't claim to know how to do this for sure and see it in the birth chart, but we know enough about astrology that we can surmise it. So you've sent in your birth data, and I'm going to disguise your name to give you privacy, but I'll use your first name so that you know when we're talking about you. And then after we talk about your chart, I would like it if you email me and tell me what attachment style you think you are. And if you don't know for sure, just get this book, because I think this is the one with the test in it.
There's several tests in that one, and there's several tests available online.
And online, okay, great. So you can take the test and find out what you are. And then we see how that works with the birth chart, because there's a relationship capacity astrology, and then something called the avastas, which just means basically the psychology of particular planetary combinations. So I thought maybe, if it's okay with you, to start with a relationship that I had in the past that was a classic anxious avoidant relationship.
That sounds fun.
It went on and on and on. We broke up and got back together 50 million times until the people in our lives, our friends, they just didn't want to hear it anymore. And we went into therapy together at one point in time, not in the same room at the same time, the same therapist at the same time. Very interesting. We did that. And I'm telling you, I've studied a lot of things over the years, mostly to try to understand that relationship and what that was about. Astrology helped me tremendously, more so than probably anything else I did. And then now this information has like added a whole nother dimension that really explains so much. So I'm going to share my screen. And
do you want to talk a little bit about the attachment styles?
Oh yeah, sure. Why don't you do that?
As you share your screen. Well, we've got, this was something that was kind of started getting its research in the past, in the 60s and the 70s. John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth were the two researchers that started really bringing this theory up. And so I think it's still an ongoing kind of research thing, but that they've done a lot for it. And they've basically decided there are, three types of attachment styles that we develop when we're very young. And it's really two. One is secure and one's insecure. And then you can break the insecure down into having an anxious style or an avoidant style. And then as I've been reading more about it, there's maybe a fourth style, which is a mix of the anxious and avoidant, or what can be called as disorganized, I've heard.
Disorganized.
Disorganized, or anxious/avoidant. Disorganized meaning, well, let me just talk a little bit about the secure style. Basically is a relationship that's set up, or your tendency is more towards having healthy boundaries, flowing in receiving and giving love, not in an extreme in any sort of way, on an emotional level, kind of more emotionally grounded, and more interested in having healthy relationships. So that's the secure style. And then for the insecure styles, we have the avoidant style, which is basically a disconnection from emotion. Somebody who's not really wanting to feel emotions a whole lot. And so their activities may be about staying disconnected.
Now, is that avoidant, or is it yet another category?
That's avoidant. That would be how the avoidant kind of acts. Like if we were to kind of distill this down, I mean, we could talk about this for so long. So there's a lot of, but the avoidant person may have more of a push-pull kind of experience, that they really do want closeness and connection, but when closeness and connection comes to them, they sort of pull away. So there can be a theme where they just are less emotionally connected in the relationship, or showing that emotional connection. And then we have the anxious type, and the anxious type is also, when I read it online, was also called ambivalent. So that's interesting.
That is interesting.
Right. And so that is someone who is more concerned about the overall well-being of their relationship, and if there's any challenge or question to that, they can start feeling anxiety. That can also be that the person doesn't necessarily have healthy boundaries, and they're more interested in pleasing another person because they're more interested in the security of the relationship than they are necessarily in always just putting up a healthy ability to confront certain things, so they're going to be more about trying to really just keep the relationship stable and secure because they're interested in feeling that security.
What else what struck me about that too, which I think is really true, is there's a belief that the relationship is fragile and easily broken.
Mm-hmm.
So something that they do or say or just for no reason that really makes a lot of sense, that the partner could someday just say, okay, I'm done, I'm out of here,
Right.
I don't love you anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, or something like that.
Right.
Especially if that anxious person has been in a relationship with an avoidant who tends to criticize
Mm-hmm.
little things and or things that are outside of that person's control to change,
Mm-hmm.
right? So there's that walking on eggshells thing where they feel like they're not good enough, they're not
Right.
perfect enough, they're not good looking enough, intelligent enough, whatever it is.
Right.
That feeling doesn't go away so easily. So
Yeah.
the relationship that they're in, even if it's with a secure person, there can be that anxiety.
And worry. Yeah. A lot of worry about, yeah, what if, because I mean, the theory is that these are attachment styles that we develop when we're really young, really, really young. And, um, like we were talking about before, though, the moment that you're born, the moment that you come in with your karma, you come in with your chart that's going to express certain things about what your journey is like here and what your personality is going to be like and the way that you're going to feel about certain things. So it's not even your parents' fault. It's more like for some reason we come in with a karma already of some sort of thing that we're trying to heal or something that it's maybe going to bring us a challenge.
The sacred contract idea.
Sacred contract, potentially, yep. Mm-hmm.
Right. Or your parents agree, okay, so I'm going to treat you really badly just so that you can learn how to be more independent, not codependent, whatever the issue is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think it's a more empowering way to look at it anyway.
Sure.
You feel like a victim your whole life, you know?
Yeah. There was something about our spirit, our energy that wanted to choose that certain nurturing environment that was exactly perfect for our soul coming in. And so, there is no external blame, but sometimes we can look at a nurturing environment and say, oh, okay, that maybe created a certain amount of trauma in that experience. And that trauma may be seen in the chart or something that may have led to it. But this is really a deep subject. So, like you said, we don't know. This is just something we've been having fun talking about and diving a little bit into and wanted to share with people because it's so helpful to get a little bit more insight. It's so helpful to kind of dive in and go, okay, I'm not the only person and there are other people and this might explain some of these things. And I think it's also important to be cautious about putting ourselves into a box, because even with the astrology, we can read, okay, I have a certain aspect or I have a certain planetary lineup, but that doesn't mean that that's an excuse to not work on it. And it also,
it doesn't fool you either for the rest of your life.
Right. And the reason for bringing up information isn't to put someone in a box so they have an excuse for why this is going on, but to give more information to help with understanding and then stepping through transformation in that sense after we've identified some of these possible reasons behind things.
Yeah. It's been really good for my current relationship too. My husband and I, he's actually reading these with me. And because he has much more of the secure style. I'm more of the anxious style. I'm always thinking about the relationship, right? Whenever I do an horary chart about him, he's like not even thinking about it. And I'm like, what does that mean? Well, now I know what it means. I think about it way too much. That's what it means. But there are tools in here. Like, this is the most stable relationship I've ever had in my life, the most longest lasting relationship, the relationship where I've managed to accomplish far more in my life, which is the benefit of having a secure attachment with someone, is that now you can concentrate on other things in life instead of always being obsessed and upset with your relationship. However, there are a few things that we can learn, like how we have conflict. And in both of these books that I've mentioned in my newsletters now, this is Wired for Love The other one is attached. And there's like a lot more books on the subject, but they give you tools.
Right.
I mean, and like for instance, in the Wired for Love, what I really liked about this book was he gave a lot of examples, and he gave like scenarios. Like, here's how you handle it when you're anxious and avoidant. Here's what you could do instead. This is how like a secure couple would handle it. And he shows you exactly what it looks like, so that you have, if you really need to, you can actually like have little scripts, so you can try it when you're in the middle of an anxious state, right? You're all upset, you can't think clearly, and it's so easy to revert to your normal style, right? Which doesn't work.
Right.
So you can try something else. So we're going to be doing that. I'm almost looking forward to our next argument. So,
so you can. Well, I mean,
look at the book.
Yeah, I love Stan Tatkin is the name of the man who wrote Wired for Love, and he wrote Wired for Dating. He talks about the chemical response that's going on in our brain, and that's one of the things that's really interesting to notice is that and to learn about is what's going on when you're about to get in a fight. What's going on in your brain? What chemicals is your body releasing? And he talks about different examples of how to, what he calls our ambassadors. So he calls the chemicals our primitives, because that's more of our, it's getting hardwired into our nervous system from when we were really young. And our ambassadors are our ability to become rational, become conscious, to notice what's going on. And it's going to take some experiences where you have this information and then you get into an argument or something and you can start going, oh, wow, I just had like a rush of this chemical going through my brain. I just feel it as this one thing. But when you really stop and pay attention, you can start really noticing that and stepping back and, becoming more conscious of what your strategy is in that moment. So
yeah, we both can do it. It's like, okay, let's get the book.
Yeah, let's get the book.
Let's look it up. Okay, so this is where this is a good place for me to, I like even the terminology that he uses in some of this, which is to, what does he say, make a friendly gesture, or to reaffirm the relationship even while you're having conflict. Whereas my tendency, which is something also he tells you things never ever to do in relationship. And I was doing those things. And so now, I've made an agreement with my husband to not do those things, which I tend to do is, okay, obviously this isn't working. We're totally incompatible. I'm leaving. I'm out of here. That's what I tend to do. And what that does, though, is it makes the relationship feel insecure.
Right.
Instead of what my first husband called the tempest in the teapot, right? It's just within the relationship. It's not going to kill the relationship to have a conflict.
Right.
And that's always been my fear. I was like, well, okay. And, and I think that might be somewhat avoidant, that behavior.
Well, it's interesting, because Ernst had talked about this over the years when he goes into the masculine principle and the feminine principle, and he says, and that's in both sexes, but that, that if we're working from a feminine principle, the feminine principle would choose to just say, no, this isn't working. He mentions that several times. That would be the tendency of the feminine to retreat or to say, you know what, that, obviously where they're really wanting the other person to say, no, let's fix this, let's fix it.
I'm so lucky that's what my husband does. And he's always done that, always. And it's always amazing to me that his feelings don't change. He's like, well, I'm mad at you right now, but yeah, I still love you, of course. And no, I don't want a divorce. Of course not. I'm like, really?
Really? All or nothing, right?
Yeah, all or nothing. It's like just burn it to the ground. That's kind of like what I tend to do. And so I've decided I'm not doing that anymore, and it's going to be really interesting to see how I get through that.
Well, this is such a vast subject too, and we've shared our interest in other authors that are out there about that. So Alison Armstrong is another one. Maybe we'll talk about her
Yeah,
at some
that's
point, because she
great.
talks about the rage monster and
Right.
how that can just pop up at any moment. And I think that these are all really interesting things, and to be able to sort of get in there and address it. Part of it is this attachment style theory. This can really show how we're wired from a very early age to respond to different things. And also the interesting thing is that we're wired to call in what we are opposite from. So if we're avoidant, we may call in anxious. And if we're anxious, we may call in avoidant. And so we're going to be attracted to that recipe for the painfulness, until we're really interested in getting in there and doing something about it. So
I realized too, I was writing a newsletter yesterday, and started writing about some of this stuff, and I realized that my parents' relationship too had a big say in how I do relationships, how my sister does relationships, and we're very similar. We're very much like our mother. And my parents had a very tumultuous relationship, but yet at the same time, what we thought was romantic, right? But they had a very tumultuous relationship. They had huge fights, and then my dad would come home with roses and a gift or something, and then they'd make up, and there'd be like this honeymoon phase for a while, and then the pressure would build, right? And then they have another huge fight. But they always managed to get back together. And in fact, they died within a month of each other.
oh wow.
So they had some of the secure stuff, but they had a lot of, I haven't yet been able to identify which one was which. If it was avoidant, anxious. I don't think it was, because they managed to get married. I think a lot of avoidant people, they just don't get married a lot of times. They can't get to that. They can't get that far. At least I've seen that a lot in my practice anyway.
In your practice, yeah. Or that they have one of those marriages that's maybe less, because the avoidants don't seem to really look for they want to avoid conflict on some level. They're not really looking for even though it can still happen. That's kind of one of the reasons why they may.
Some of the push away behaviors, though, those can cause conflict.
Yeah, definitely.
Like being criticized, the criticism thing is a push away thing. Right? And so if you don't know what's going on, you can react to that, and then reacting to that causes an argument, which of course gets crazier and crazier until, depending on what else you have going on in your compatibility. So like that relationship that I mentioned, right, that first relationship, we had an excess of the fire the fire element.
Oh.
So, what that means is that we'd have just a little disagreement that could suddenly turn into like a forest fire out of nowhere, totally out of control. And I remember times where we were like haranguing each other and just saying the stupidest things, and then look at each other and burst out laughing. The argument was so ridiculous. It had that quality of not being like real. It was like out of control.
Right.
That's when you have too much of the fire element in your compatibility.
Yeah, and that could be another subject that we can talk about.
Yeah, I mean, like what happens, what, sometimes I wonder, because of the compatibility technique that we use when we do relationship astrology, sometimes a relationship can actually, I won't go so far as to say cause a certain way of being, like an anxious attachment style or avoidant or whatever, but I think it can really contribute to it. So,
definitely.
Really, can you imagine, okay, say two people get together and they have an excess of the water element, which always makes the woman feel really insecure over time, and excess of the air element, same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So the fire element, the man suffers more with that
Right. Right.
one. But that can really figure in too,
Right.
you know?
Sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, there's so many things that can figure into this, but when you look at compatibility and you can see something like that getting triggered, I would guess that your attachment style is going to get triggered.
Oh yeah.
And
Absolutely.
if there is a fourth one, which is anxious avoidant, it may go back and forth depending on who you're with. You know, you may become more anxious when you're with an avoidant person. You may become more avoidant if you're with an anxious person. You know?
I believe that is exactly
Yeah.
what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and if you're lucky enough to be with a secure person, though I often wonder, why would a secure person be attracted to either an anxious or an avoidant? But it happens.
It's quite common, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. But then you become more secure, you know?
Yes. I think we can grow out of these things. And it's not, yeah, I mean, I think you can become more secure just working on it within yourself. I mean, I'm not sure if there's, you know, any statistics on there about avoidant and anxious relationships working through this together, but I think that that's a possibility too. If both people are willing to be conscious and really interested in shedding old patterns, old habits, old beliefs, really wanting to, work on themselves through these things that are, you know, showing up in their relationship, that we can do that.
It does happen. Though he says that it's
not easy.
Well, avoidants tend to not do that simply because they think there's nothing wrong with their relating style.
Right.
And, you know, the culture kind of reinforces that, you know, the idea that a marriage is actually, you know, first it's me, right? And then it's you. When he talks about that a lot in his book, Wired for Love, which I thought was brilliant because it's true. You know, we see marriage and relationship as just another opportunity for self-fulfillment, rather than seeing it as the relationship as a third thing that needs to be cared for by both people, which is a really important paradigm shift, a way of looking at it. That really makes a big difference.
Yeah.
So, and that's true. That's the way that we think about marriage in our society, and have for quite a long time, at least since the 60s.
Right. And I mean, that's the thing, the avoidants want love too.
Yeah.
They don't want to be alone and totally isolated. It's just one, because of the culture, and also maybe because of whatever that attachment style has been developed by, they you know, they're not necessarily going to see it through the long haul, because they think, okay, there'll be another person, there'll be someone else, there'll be the next person, that kind of thing. But I think at a certain time, people get to that space in their lives where they realize what's going on. You know, I really do want to have a secure, attached relationship. And so there is that hope for becoming conscious, even if you're an avoidant.
I was thinking about how you're an optimistic person, obviously, because I know somebody who is in his mid-60s, not there yet.
Right. Right. And this is, you know, this is one of the things that we've talked about astrologically. How can you see when someone comes into a time frame where they're going to become more interested in their own awakening, or their own consciousness, or their own, you know, what they're doing here on the planet. And so I'm sure there's a lot of people that go through their whole lives that don't ever get to that place of saying, what is this all about? You know, what am I supposed to be working on? What am I not conscious of? But I do. I have optimism, and I have faith that happen to the worst of us, the most dense and stubborn of us, that we will eventually come into those questions. And because, you know, our society is so interesting. It's so set up to, you know, to show us that maybe relationships are more disposable, or that there's always something better that's around the next corner. But that's not necessarily true or fulfilling.
Yeah, and we've all seen movies like about the guy who was what you call a ladies' man most of his life, right? And he has this legend with his friends, you know, they're all kind of envious of him because he's always showing up with some beautiful woman on his arm. And then you find out when you get to know him how deeply lonely he is.
Yeah.
And how he comes to this realization that instead of looking for perfection, for this idealized idea of love, and the most beautiful woman he can possibly get, is he decides that he wants a real connection. And those are great stories. They really are, because they are representing what you said. There are some people who do finally see that. Mm-hmm. Even if it's really late in life. I mean, it's better late than never, right?
Yeah, you're really not ever too old. And that's what I love. You were talking about the Wired for Love, but if you look into the Wired for Dating, which is another book that Stan Kekin wrote, he goes through all of these myths about love that we tell ourselves. Like, you can't love another person until you love yourself.
That was a good one.
Yeah, that was a good one. Just realizing, like, no, that's how we learn about love, is that we are in it. And, that I'm too old for dating, or I'm too old for love. That's not true either. There's so many things out there that we've been told, or we tell ourselves, or we hear. We have these voices that tell us, and it's not necessarily true. And one of the ones that I'm loving from reading these books is understanding, like, we're sort of designed to be together. We're not necessarily meant to be isolated lone wolves. We're pack creatures. Bonding and connecting is something that we do want, that we're biologically designed for that. And that was a real interesting one for me, because for a long time, studying a lot of the more spiritual aspect of astrology, I kept thinking, okay, I just should not want this, or I need to just be spiritual, and then let go of my desires and let go of these things. And I think there's a balance with it.